Of TGW. I'm joined once again by Steve from Gamers Nexus.
Hello.
What's up, Steve? What's going on with you, man? What have you been up to since the last time we did the show?
Testing Battlefield for the most part, and the GTX 1050 stuff.
Well, that's interesting because I've been playing Battlefields basically since the last time we did this. Yeah, that's pretty much all I've been doing.
Must be nice, yeah.
I've been enjoying it. I haven't really touched the single player too much since the game actually came out, but I've been playing the hell out of the multiplayer.
Yeah, multiplayer, I've got maybe 30 minutes of actual play in, and it was pretty fun. I like it. It feels similar to Battlefield 2.
Yeah, it reminds of Bad Company 2 actually. Did you play much Bad Company 2?
I did. I played Bad Company 2 and whatever was after it, I guess Battlefield 3 and 4.
Yeah, I would say that this is the closest thing to Bad Company 2 so far, and I think that's because they went back a lot. They had a lot of forum posts where they were asking people like what they liked about those games so much.
Right.
I think they took a lot of the stuff people said and actually applied it pretty well, especially
Yeah.
to the operations mode.
Yeah, Operations is the one you were just telling me about. I have not played it yet, so if I find time, I'll try and do that tonight, I guess.
Yeah, it is. Even though you're capturing flags, it is still very similar to Rush, and it's probably the closest thing to Bad Company 2 Rush that I've played, and I'm playing that mostly because the Rush mode is limited to 24 people, which is kind of crappy on PC.
Right,
It's like
right.
just I don't know. I feel like I'm just waiting a lot for people to come to kill basically. But on the 64 player operations, it's been awesome.
Yeah, yeah. 64 players is always good.
Yeah.
It's not too common, but I like it. I like the maps are huge too. So
Yep. So do you want to tell people for maybe if anyone didn't catch you last time, do you want to let them know what you guys do over at Gamers Nexus?
sure. So we do. I've been operating this. It started as a website 2008. We grew into YouTube channels stuff and basically just really technical, in-depth looks at GPUs or coolers or whatever. So a lot of teardowns and a lot of like lower level component analysis.
Very nice, yeah. Yeah, you guys go really in depth on all the GPU stuff. I really like that your 1050 and 1050 Ti video. If you guys haven't checked it out, go look at it on their channel. It was probably of all the 1050 reviews I watched, theirs was the most in depth by far.
I appreciate that.
No problem. Yeah, we got all your links are down in the description there.
Nice.
Usually we start off these shows doing tech pickups or anything interesting that we might want to show off. Do you have anything? I'll let you go first since you're the guest. You got anything you want to show off?
Sure. I've been working on for about a week now the NZXT Kraken coolers. So some of you may have seen this. Their new Kraken series X62 and 42 and 52. Basically, this is the one that I didn't take apart. Anyone who follows our channel saw the unfortunate destruction of another one. But so they've got this pump plate that has an RGB LED in the back. And interestingly, this is, to my knowledge, the first Asetek built pump that has had vendor input on the electricals. So that would be NZXT actually building this custom PCB. So we took one apart. This is inside of here. And it's got like a thermocouple on it, so it can sense the liquid temperature really accurately. It's got all the LEDs on there on the backside. And then the pump plate just pulls off like this, which you'll see is that.
Is that how it looks? Just a mirror like that all the time, or is that like that
Yeah.
lights up?
So it's that is the most important point, I guess, is it's an infinity mirror effect. So there's an LED strip, and it lights up, and there's basically kind of a one-way mirror type setup.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks kind of infinite.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's a Gen 5 Asetek pump. So these would be comparable in theory to like a Corsair H100 IB2, just with the more advanced like custom firmware, custom PCB. So I'm hoping to have our review online tomorrow or Friday for that.
Nice. And what are they doing? 120, 240, 360?
140, 240, and 280.
Nice.
So yeah, the 240 I think will probably be the most popular.
Yeah, it seems to usually be the 240s.
Yeah.
I want to get a 280 millimeter cooler one day though. I always just keep getting the 240s.
Yeah, 280 is just I mean most cases that support a 240 these days will support a 280. So
they seem far less common though.
Yeah. The coolers themselves are less common, but it's an argument where it's like, and I'll have the thermal analysis on this, but basically, you hit a point where you're spending $140 or $130 whatever it is for like a 140, or you spend like an extra 10 or 20 for a 240, 280. So I don't know. I guess that's once you're already spending like 100 plus, it kind of feels like what's another $10.
Yeah, my only motivation for getting the 280 is because I would have to think it's going to be a little bit quieter with the fans.
Yeah, anything with 140s. The 140 millimeter fans on these run at 1700 RPM, I think, and
It's pretty low.
the 120s are something like 2000. So it's a decent amount louder because noise is logarithmic. So, but yeah, definitely a
What do
little
you
quiet.
what are you guys testing it up against? Are you putting it up against other Acer Tech designs or any non Acer Tech coolers
Yeah.
too?
So I've got the new EK Predator 280,
Nice.
which has the quick release, so you can connect it to a GPU as well.
Yeah, I got one of the I got one of theirs in my main system here. It's great.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. I'm testing the Hex 2.0 I showed you last time, which is that thermoelectric one. Um, and then Corsair H100 IB2, which is also a Gen 5 Ace Tech pump, but different implementation of it.
Very cool. For me, this I had actually tweeted out the other day, but for people that didn't see it, I got this from V1 Tech. This is going to be for the upcoming Glorious builds. I'm going to go full screen here so I can show you guys. Let's see there.
Someone says my mic is louder, apparently.
Your mic is louder? Well, I've got you pulled down. I can pull you down a little bit more. Maybe you should lower the gain on your that new amp you got.
Yes.
So this is a backplate for the RX 480. You guys can see on the side there, PC Master Race. This is going in the Glorious build. It's very on the nose with the PC Master Race stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it came out really good though. I've also got grills for all the fans in there, and I'm also should by Friday have the rest of the fan grills and also an SSD cover as well, because in the case I'm using the BitPhoenix Aurora, it's got like a little display in there where you could see the SSD. So I wanted to get a PC Master Race plate for that also. But
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that.
yeah, but this thing all when it's all in the build and everything like that, because a lot of people were giving me crap when I painted my heat sinks yellow on this motherboard, because by itself, admittedly, it did not look fantastic. But now that it's in the build with this thing and the custom cables and everything, it looks gorgeous.
Yeah, I liked you have a back plate, right? And then you painted the chipset heatsink and stuff like that.
Yeah, I painted the heat sinks with yellow engine enamel.
Right.
And last one is Sapphire 390 Nitro, which I used in the testing on the Battlefield video the other day. So I'm going to be doing a lot more testing with this against the 970. I'm excited about doing that with like all the 2016 games.
Right.
Because I was telling you about this, like these are still like two of the most popular GPUs out there that people still own.
Yeah. Yeah, that's we just tested like the 770. I went back 2 generations. That video goes up soon, but it's it's the problem we run into, especially with a game like Battlefield 1. You have limited activations on that game, but then there's just a million video cards, so you can't test them all.
Yeah.
It's definitely a good service to still look at, like the 390 and the 970. Yeah.
Rambam asked about the noise levels on the NZXT CPU cooler. I guess the pump and stuff like that. What were your initial impressions? I guess with that.
I have tested them. I have DB tests. I haven't looked at the decibel levels yet. They did put this giant piece of foam in there this time,
Wow.
so that damps the actual pump noise pretty well. It's quieter than the Gen 4 pump, but I haven't run the numbers yet, so I can't give you an exact like dB value.
All right. But before we get into our first news topic, we're going to do a little bit of a discussion about DirectX 12 and stuff that Steve and I kind of wanted to do, and I'll let you introduce that since it was your idea to go ahead and do it. So take it away.
Sure. I get the top level, I guess, is DirectX 12. I think Battlefield 1 and other games where you see either like a 1-to-1 scaling or kind of limited scaling with performance versus DX11. I think the point to clarify is that just using DX12 isn't like a free FPS gain. It doesn't just like Vulkan, just by implementing Vulkan or DX12, it doesn't mean that your game's automatically going to be like low-level API performance where the developers are tapping into memory management and like doing CU reservation and stuff like that. So that was the idea for the top level topic.
Yeah. I saw a lot of this when DX12 first started getting kicked around. People were thinking it was going to be like this magic bullet for, multi GPU support. Every game is going to support multi GPU and it's going to scale perfectly.
Right.
And everything that's going to be DirectX 12 is going to perform absolutely amazing. Because that's been one of the biggest things about DirectX 12 is that it's more or less an optimization thing with CPU overhead, a low overhead API. Versus on previous generations, usually it was just kind of implementations of new graphical features that couldn't be done on previous gens.
Yeah, and that the main gain is shifting draw calls from the basically. So whenever you create a frame in your games, the CPU has to do work just like the GPU does. So that's why you see if you run a 1080 and a Titan X at 1080p in a game, you'll see them probably get the same average frame rate because at some point the CPU just can't keep up anymore because it's got to participate in those draw calls.
Yeah, for every frame that's getting processed by rendered by the GPU has to be processed on the CPU side of things.
Right.
So you just eventually you hit a limit, even on top tier stuff. I remember Jay saw this with his 5960X when he had the 3 Titans, I think it was.
Right.
The last gen Titan X's, and he would see a bottleneck where once you got over 2 cards, you didn't really see as much of a benefit, at least at lower resolutions, because there was so many frames that it was trying to put out.
Yeah.
But on higher resolutions, though, it would still show a benefit because there's less frames it actually has to process on the CPU.
Right, and that draw call, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically when all the polygons in games that build your smooth geometry, it's comprised of primitives like triangles. So a draw call is every single one of those primitives or polys is being requested from the CPU to the GPU. So DX12 does eliminate some of this, but it's not that easy. The developers have to actually build their game and probably their engine from the ground up for DX12 or Vulkan. Because what you'll see in some of the other games that claim to have DX12 is there might actually be a slight performance hit, and that's often because the developers have wrapped DX11, and they just have a wrapper that calls to the DX12 API, so it'll execute with DirectX 12, but it's not doing any of the actual optimization.
Yeah, I think we saw that big time in Battlefield 1 where both sides lost FPS. AMD did a little bit better. They kind of stayed around the same area, but Nvidia lost a lot of frames.
Yeah.
And DX12 because it really is a wrapper, and that was another thing with the Nexus games, Rise of the Tomb Raider and Hitman. Also wrappers. I think the first true game that we've actually seen with true DX12 implementation is Gears of War 4. And it runs fantastic.
Ashes as well, but it is more of a benchmark than a game.
Yeah, it really is. I sometimes I forget that that's actually a game, honestly.
Yeah, I don't. No hate to any Ashes players out there. I don't think it's a high popularity game though. But so basically, when developers build a game for DX12, they have to worry about things like suddenly memory management is now in the hands of the developers rather than normally it would be in the hands of Nvidia and AMD through the driver side. Not just memory management, but everything. Like if you are drawing an explosion or volumetric effects, it may be the case that the developers aren't doing a good job of it because they don't have a lot of teeth in the game. But with drivers, because AMD and Nvidia have decades of experience with it, they can fine tune to say, I'm running AMD, so it would be better if we draw these effects using these shaders or reserve these CUs for this. And NVIDIA may have something else. But with DX12, that's in the hands of the developers. So they have a lot to learn to really get that FPS gain.
Yeah, the important thing really is just at the end of the day is that it's not a magic bullet. It's not going to fix every game just by throwing DX12 on it. And more often than not, at least in the games that we've seen so far, it's almost like a tick box that they're kind of trying to throw on the game at the end, like saying, oh, well, we have DirectX 12, so therefore it's modern and it's new and you want it. Kind of like RGB or tempered glass side panels on cases or something, Yeah. It's just it's a tick box they're kind of throwing onto a game, unlike Gears 4, which actually used it to its full benefit because the engine was designed on DX12 from the ground up.
Right.
With all of that in mind, just like we saw on Doom with Vulkan. And it benefited tremendously with Vulkan because it was actually built on that. That's what John Carmack built the engine on top of.
Yeah. Doom is definitely the seminal example of a low-level API working as it should, and they took their time building it, so it shows.
Yeah, and to counteract that, you can go ahead and look at something like Talos Principle, which threw on Vulkan as a wrapper, just like we've seen a lot of DX12 games, and you actually lose performance. It's just saying, hey, look, it has Vulkan.
Yeah, Talos. is trying to do a lower level implementation of Vulkan. They have OpenGL in there. They even have DirectX 9 in there.
Yep.
So on the surface, it looks like a really interesting benchmark title. You look at all of these APIs, but they optimize them all differently, different amount of time spent on each one. Vulkan's lower level, DX11 OpenGL a little lower level. So rather than DX9, for example. So yeah, it's not. There's no like perfect. You can test all APIs equally game right now.
Yeah, it really isn't. Nothing completely equal that scales perfectly as you would expect it, except really Doom, I guess.
Doom is good.
Doom going from OpenGL to Vulkan, you can really see the implementation, how it benefits both sides, one way or the other. And
Right.
it definitely, I think AMD saw larger gains there on that one.
Yeah, AMD is doing a bit better on that. And one point is AMD does have a different architecture. Obviously, they've got some hardware units on the GPU reserved for asynchronous compute and things like that. Nvidia does have asynchronous compute as well, though. I want to clarify that, where they both have means to process things asynchronously out of queue, but they do it differently. So Nvidia does things like compute preemption, where AMD prefers their ACEs.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting also on Gears 4 to bring it back to that. I had tested the 480 against the 1060, and I was surprised to see that the 480 and 1060 was basically a deadlock tie in that particular title. Mostly because it was an NVIDIA optimized title, so I kind of expected NVIDIA to take a huge lead there. So that really kind of said to me just how much stronger AMD is on their side with the async compute stuff. That was kind of my takeaway anyway.
Yeah, I'd have to look at my own benchmarks because I don't remember the results off the top of my head.
I mean, I ran in game and I also ran the built-in benchmark, and it was
Right.
like literally like 1 frame difference.
Yeah, I'm
close.
looking at ours right now. We have the point of difference we had for Gears 4 was they were about the same, 1 frame, like you're saying, in averages.
Yeah, the minimums were different. AMD had, I think, won out in the minimums. I think
AMD was much lower in the like 1% and 0.1% low values, like the 99 percentile performance, which means you see a bit more stuttering on occasion, but the averages were pretty close. The frame times were just worse.
Yep. Yes. So that could be seeing that it was optimized a little bit better for Nvidia, possibly. Yeah, it's possible. It's possible.
It could be. AMD's got some issues to work out in their drivers with frame times anyway. They've been doing a better job of it, especially since Scott Wasson moved over there from Tech Report.
Mm-hmm.
But that's been an issue for them for a long time. So I think they are improving, but they've got a ways to go.
In BF1, when I tested DX12, I saw stuttering on both sides for the 1060 and the 480 when I switched it over to DX12, especially on. I ended up having to do a few different runs because I found that on the first run it would stutter massively, but then when I would reload the checkpoint and go back to the beginning, it would run a lot better this next time around because everything was stored to the memory.
Yeah, and that's part of the developers not really doing memory management probably the most efficient way, because the first time you load a level, you'll have all the textures and resources are still loading.
Yep.
The first execution of a test was generally lower for us than the subsequent ones.
Yeah, that's why I had to run each card a few times before I would actually get to my test runs because I didn't want there to be any variables like that getting introduced. All right, well I think that's about it on the DX12 stuff. Yeah, do you have anything else you want to add to that before we get into the news?
I mean, the only last point to throw in, I guess, is I'll probably do a video on this, but we have a lot of users, as I'm sure you do, where people are often commenting like, website A got these results, website B got these results. Why are they so different? And other than just like location of the test where it's executed, there's also different variables you can measure. So a frame is not necessarily a frame with every software. Like Fraps uses onPresent, PresentMon can use onPresent or onDisplay. So with DX12 getting more prevalent, that matters because you can't just use the same tool anymore. Fraps doesn't work. So you have to use PresentMon or something else where...
I still don't know how to set... Do you need a separate capture system to use that?
No, you don't, but it is command line executed and it's not very friendly. And then we have our own script that rips out the data it presents. It creates like 5 columns, and one of them is like frame number, and then you have the frame time in milliseconds. So you have to run basically like a script to convert that into FPS. So it's not necessarily trivial.
Yeah, the only thing I've been able to get to work for me is mirrorless action, and even that is kind of wonky with some games. Like
Right.
Battlefield 1, it would crash the game. I found I would have to get into the game, actually load into the level, then alt tab out and launch action, and then open the game
Right.
back up, and that would work about 50% of the time. So it
Yeah.
was very frustrating benchmarking a game like that, and then it was even harder. Then it's really kind of hit or miss on whether it's going to work at all with UWP titles.
Yeah. Yeah. Presentmon's the best with those in my experience because it is built by Microsoft and by Intel and it's open source. But again, it's not necessarily the easiest tool to interpret the data.
Or even get it set up because you got to go like compile it and stuff like that from GitHub, right?
Yeah, which isn't too hard. It's basically downloading some libraries, but it is extra work to do. Yeah.
Yeah, especially I mean, honest, I'm not like a coder, so I don't know how to do like how
Oh,
that stuff is handled. I'm
yeah,
sure it's fairly simple. I haven't gone about finding a guide on how to set it
right.
all up.
You basically click a button. You download like Visual Studio and click a button.
That's what
Uh,
someone had said to me. I had asked a
right,
coding buddy like, how do I do this? She's like, oh, you just download this. Like, oh, it sounds like a lot of work.
right.
It's like mirrorless action still kind of works. I'll stick with that for now.
Yeah, yeah. It's compared to Fraps, a lot harder these days.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, they need to update Fraps for DX12. I'm hoping that happens. Maybe.
Yeah, we'll
Fingers
see.
crossed.
Yeah.
All right, so our first news topic here. This really kind of caught me by surprise. EVGA seems to be getting in some hot water, no pun intended, for their GTX 1070 and 1080 having some overheating issues, specifically on the VRMs. And as what was it, Tom's Hardware? I think was it Germany?
Germany.
Yeah, Tom's Hardware Germany had found that there were actually no thermal pads over the VRMs on the samples that they had
Or the
received,
VRAM.
or
Yeah.
the VRAM, yeah. So they had been heating up to around 107 degrees Celsius on the memory chips,
On
which is
the
pretty high.
yeah, 107 on the VRM for sure. I don't remember what the VRAM was, but um, I think this issue is partially overblown by things like Reddit.
Yeah,
Uh, it's not quite as big a deal as some people have made it sound, but it's definitely an oversight. And I talked to EVGA about this, and they know it's an oversight. They're starting to ship thermal pads as a free option, or you can trade cards with them if you're really unhappy. But I guess like we have BuildZoid doing an analysis on the PCB and the VRM for us, and the EVGA cards are designed to do like 35 amps at 100C per phase. So even at 100C, you can still do that's still 350 amps available, which is way more than a GTX 1080 or Pascal card would ever need. 125C, you still have like 200 amps available. So until you start pushing 120 Celsius on the VRM, the VRM will probably be fine. It might not be efficient, but it'll be fine.
yeah. I that's kind of what my takeaway was after I read this. I was like, okay, it's not good, but it's probably not going to cause any actual issues in the real world. It's probably not going to degrade performance much, or the longevity of the card being able to use it. It's probably going to be fine in most use cases.
Yeah, the
Unless maybe
place
extreme overclocking and stuff, that might
right.
be, yeah.
Yeah, overclocking you'd want to be careful with, especially on the VRAM. VRAM is more sensitive to the heat than the VRM, and you'd also want to be careful in like poor ventilation case scenarios or high ambient. If you have an ambient of 30C and a small case, yeah, you could actually potentially do some damage to the FETs. But would you notice it? That's really hard to say. I don't know that you would notice it, but is it an oversight? Yes. Is it like some catastrophic pitchforks? Probably not, because they will replace it for free. So
Yeah, they have said that now if you have gotten the 1070 or the 1080 for the Win cards, or actually any of the ACX cards on that series,
right.
that you can get thermal pad replacements. Then you do have to go put them on yourself, take apart your card.
Yeah, or you can send it in if you want it to be without a card for a few days or whatever.
Yeah, it's usually longer in my experience with
Right.
that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
This kind of actually reminded me of. Do you remember back on the 970 where they had to do so many iterations of their 970 card until they finally redesigned the block to actually be made for that card because they were using the blocks from the previous generation?
Yes, they depends on sort of what generation, what cards you're looking at, but normally when the vendors design something like a VRM, they'll kind of lift it and use it on the next generation because why spend the money to redesign a VRM or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah. But cooling ACX3 is supposed to be improved over 2. But obviously they didn't put thermal pads on where there should be some. And the problem there is like, even though the temperatures are acceptable and that the VRM will still function, the problem is that you've now got a metal plate sitting above a VRM module or VRAM module, excuse me. So you have a metal plate sitting above that, and there's no contact to them. So you can't rely on conduction to get rid of the heat. So now this plate is actually acting the opposite way it should. It's trapping all the heat in there. You're building an air pocket. So, and the air is not a good thermal conductor. So it's definitely they could do a better job at it.
So my question, this is the same thing I asked you, is are they going to now fix this where the newer runs of these cards that they're still producing, or are they going to go ahead and fix this now, from the factory, so that no one has to worry about getting thermal pads afterwards? That was I would hope that they would.
Yeah,
fix that.
I'm not 100% clear on that, but I think that is the plan. Yeah. But we're talking to EVGA still, so hopefully we'll have an answer on all of that soon.
Yeah, hopefully. But yeah, this was something a lot of people had messaged me about, and I think Drake Owens, he's in chat. He had actually sent me the link over on this initially, so thank you, Drake, for informing me on this one. Yeah, next up we have AMD. We've got a couple of topics with them. It's basically their response to the 1050 and the 1050 Ti came out, which was Nvidia's response to AMD with the 460 and the 470. So now it looks like they're trying to, kind of spoil their their cards. I shouldn't say victory, but their cards coming out by taking $10 off the price, which I think that's most interesting, more so at the 460 side, because it brings down the 460 to an even $100 if you can actually find the GPUs for that much. The other day I was still finding the Gigabyte card for $110. That was the cheapest one, but seeing that card at even $100 is pretty impressive with the performance that you can get out of it.
The 460, our conclusion was to sort of recommend the extra $10 for 1050 if performance was a big enough gap.
Yeah.
But the 470, if there's two models I saw, like you said, there's not a lot of them, but two models I saw at 170. At that price, it makes more sense to buy a 470 than like $165 AIB partner 1050 Ti. But the 1050 Ti at 140 still fills like a decent market segment. So.
And also at that budget, the 470 is I would recommend it over the 4GB 480 as well, if you can even find those.
Yeah, if you can, right, because you're saving $30, so that's a good amount more you could put towards like a better CPU or something.
Yeah, and they were so close in their performance that it really wasn't worth spending the extra $30. If it was maybe $10,
10 I would spend, but not 30. Yeah, depends.
It really depends on your budget and how tight you are down to the wire. But seeing these cards is impressive though, with the prices and the performance they can have now. I think what was the 1050 Ti was doing 58 FPS, I think, in your testing on BF1 at Ultra 1080p.
Yeah, I think so. That's we were right around 60. So.
And what's the 1050 Ti's launch price? What is that one?
140 is MSRP. The main one, we have two. We have the cheap $140 ones, single fan cooler, and then the other one that I tested was a dual fan cooler one, but it's priced at 165. So again, it's a problem of at that price, $5 more. The 470 was kind of kicking the 1050 Ti's butt in a lot of games. So
yeah,
just depends on the 140 is a good price for 1050 Ti, but I wouldn't spend too much more than that.
So between the 1050 Ti though and the 460, what would you lean towards?
The 1050 Ti and the 460.
Yeah.
I would. I would recommend the 1050 Ti if they can stretch.
Or is it if you're looking at the 1050 Ti, is it worth spending the extra money on the 470? I guess is maybe a better question.
So there you run into the issue that everyone does with PC parts, where it's like, well, if I only spend $20 more, I'll have this, but it goes on forever until you hit like a 10.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's kind of the struggle I went through like a few years ago building a PC. Like the budget, when I was on a budget, I was just like, I could just spend $50 more and get the 670. If I spend another $100, I get the 680. Right. It's like I really want the 680 because that's the best.
Right. Yeah, and I think our recommendation was basically at the very low end, if you're playing esports titles, CS:GO, Overwatch, Dota, a 1050 makes a lot of sense. I would buy it over a 460 pretty much every day, as long as it's $110 and not more. The 1050 Ti makes sense if you really, really can't stretch to 170 and you need that extra $30 to upgrade from an i3 to an i5 or something like that. But otherwise, I'd basically like kind of block it out as 1050 at the lowest end of the market right now, and then 470 if you can make the jump.
Yeah, 470 is kind of right on the edge because it's almost like the 4 gigabyte 480. Like I said before, it's so
Right,
close that it's almost the same. So for 170, it's actually a pretty good value.
right, right.
And then we've got another thing here to follow this up, which is that AMD may actually be launching another card in its stack, which will come between the 460 and the 470, which would be either the 465 or the 470 SE. And this will be cut down a little bit further than what we already saw in those implementations.
Yeah, right. We saw videocards.com with the Z was the main source I was looking at. They compiled 3 sources and basically said, we don't know the name yet, but like you said, 465, 470 SE or 470D, all kind of the same rumored card right now. And that's apparently going to be somewhere in the range of 1792 streaming processors, SPs, and then the 470 for reference is at 2048. 460, what is that, 864, I think. So 14% increase in streaming processors from the 470, which would land you right around where the 1050 Ti is.
Yep. So it seems like if this has come to pass, that's basically what they're trying to launch it as to compete with the 1050 Ti. Because right now, as we just saw with the topic we were talking about, there's a pretty large gap between 460 and 470 performance. So they kind of do need something in the middle there since Nvidia has it. So they need something to compete there.
Yeah, well, the jump is, again, like 800, just the cores alone, 864 versus like 2048. That is a massive jump. Polaris 11 versus 10 or whatever, so it's a big deal too. So, yeah, 465 or whatever they call it, if it lands $140 or 130, that would pretty much invalidate the RX 460, basically by either a 1050, a Ti, or 465 at that price.
Yep, it would. Yeah, definitely. And that's going to be the head-to-head battle. A lot of people are going to want to see if this comes out as that versus the 1050 Ti and see which one is better at that around $150 price.
Right. Yep. I don't think we have a rumored launch on this rumored card, do we?
No, I don't think so. I did not see any. I did not see anything about that. This is very, very new. So, well, actually, it's from 6 days ago. That's surprising.
Yeah.
I only just saw that when you linked it yesterday. But yeah, we might see it.
Yeah.
I would have to think before the end of the year is out. But it's getting down to the wire though. Before usually it's getting pretty late in the year now.
Yeah, you want to post it before Black Friday for sure.
Yeah, so they don't have much time. If they want to get this out to compete with the 1050 Ti, then they need to hurry up.
Yeah.
And there's also the other possibility this might only launch in like Asian markets. We've seen that too before with some of these cards.
Yeah, with the FX CPUs too. There were a couple that were China only until PAX, I guess.
Yep, and then they would kind of just push them out the door at the end of the card's life cycle, right before the next gen came out, which would be like Vega. We've seen that plenty of times.
Yeah. Well, they got to clear the stock, so get it off the shelves.
Pretty much. So next up, we've got this Bethesda story, which definitely rubbed both of us the wrong way. I think it's going to rub pretty much every reviewer the wrong way, and if you're a gamer out there, it's something you should definitely be aware of. Is that Bethesda has now decided to hold back review copies of their games to the press and media until the games actually come out. So they're going to be starting this with Dishonored 2, which is coming out next month, and they'll be giving it to reviewers only the day before its actual release, because that's when pre-orders get it. If you pre-order the game, you get it a day early, which I don't advise anyone to do, especially I never advise anyone to pre-order anyway, but especially with this new policy in place. It's so anti-consumer, it's anti-media. It only benefits one entity, and that is Bethesda.
Right.
It's the only person that benefits from this.
Bethesda's a strange company to work with anyway on the media side. Like,
oh man, they're tough. That is a tough cookie to crack.
Yeah, and we've done trade shows for at least 6 years now, and every time I've been at a show with Bethesda, basically to book an appointment with them, they won't do it in advance half the time. I have to go to the booth at 9 a.m. and schedule an appointment, which is just mind-blowing to begin with. So I don't know. I guess this policy came out of the same darkness in their hearts. I'm not really sure. But influencers, it's important to note, I think.
Yeah,
influencers are still getting this. And so people who are not critical media, people who are going to post YouTube videos, they call these people influencers, they're getting the game. Just people who want to do media production reviews, critically or independently are not.
Yeah, absolutely. And they had linked to this. If you go search now, there are videos already going up about
Right.
this game, but they're what you would call influencers, which are basically
Let's play.
it's basically advertisers. It's people that they know are going to play this game, and they're only going to talk about how much super fun it is and how super amazing this game is, and how you should go super buy it right now.
Right.
They say super a lot. I've noticed that.
And just just as a note, reading the chat, this is not a rumor. It's not. This was like Bethesda actually posted this on their blog.
Oh yeah. They laid out the whole plan and everything. They did this with Doom as well, and I guess they're using that as now their example of saying, oh look, we did it with Doom and it worked, so now with we can do it all the time.
Yeah.
And okay, that game came out and it worked, but in the past, you're seeing this on things like Assassin's Creed has done this to reviewers in the past. No Man's Sky, and usually it's a sign of the developer wanting to hide something so people don't know, the bad stuff about their game. But Bethesda's kind of in a different area where their games are almost always really good.
Right. Yeah. There's bugs, but they tend to be pretty okay, pretty well received.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of like, I mean, it's still crappy. At the end of the day, this is crappy what they're doing, but I almost kind of understand why they want to do it, because their games are always usually like, their fans are usually like over the top about the games coming out, so they want to protect the story. They don't want any leaks getting out about that kind of stuff, and I almost kind of understand where they're coming from, only because it's Bethesda. If it was anyone else, like Ubisoft, it's just like instant, like, oh, you're trying to hide something.
Yeah, and I think the biggest concern is just that when we get anything early, like the GTX 1050, I had that for a week before we could post anything about it. And there's a very good reason for that. They're normally called embargoes. Some people call them NDAs, not really necessarily the same. But embargoes are good because they let reviewers actually take time with something and learn about it. And we can, like if I ran into a bug, for example, with Skyrim Special Edition or whatever it's called, I could contact Bethesda and say, hey, do you guys know about this? Is there a day one patch planned? And try and get it resolved before a review goes live. But you lose that with this policy. And what happens is media, because we survive on getting traffic, media will race each other, post the first review. And I guarantee you there will be like an hour one review of Skyrim Special Edition, and they'll have played 30 minutes of the game.
Yeah, they'll play the 30 minutes of the game, and they'll justify it by saying, well, I've already played Skyrim before, so all I got to do is load it up and see how much better the graphics look, and there you go.
Take a few screenshots, call it a day, go into no clip mode or whatever. They could probably even pre-write the review, honestly.
Yeah, Total Biscuit posted a video about this earlier today, and he laid out all of this stuff really well. I definitely suggest anyone that's curious about this to go check out his video that he did about Bethesda's review policies now. But this is it only benefits Bethesda at the end of the day. It doesn't benefit the consumers or us media and those types of people that are those outlets that are just so desperate to get those clicks and get out there first. Don't want to mention any names, Video Gamer TV, but you're going to see it eventually. You're going to see this where Dishonored 2 is going to come out and there's going to be a review the first day of saying here it is.
Right. And they'll not have played it for a whole day either. So.
Yep. Yeah. So. Yeah, that's unfortunate because when I see a review, people ask me all the time like, why don't you review games anymore? It's because I don't finish them.
Right.
I don't consider something a review unless you've actually completed the entire game, because you don't know how the story arc is going to play out.
Right.
You might play the first half of Fallout 4 and it'll be amazing, and then maybe it just completely falls off at the end. You don't know.
Well, yeah. Imagine playing Mass Effect 3. Remember all the hate that got? Like if you play that and review it without finishing it, there's a huge story you miss out on where everybody, it seemed like, was pissed at the way that game ended.
Mafia 3, another one recently, even besides its performance issues, the first 2 hours of the game were actually really good. But from everything I've heard afterwards is that the story missions after that are literally the same exact mission over and over and over again in the same places every single time, just making you rinse and repeat against the same enemies in the same place. So if you only played the first couple hours and you called it a review and say, oh, that's a day over, then you're going to have a very different perspective from someone that put 30, 40 hours into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. All right, so next up we've got another story which is upsetting a lot of people, so we're kind of staying on the angry path here. This I thought this was pretty disgusting to see what they're doing over there. So Game is a store in the all over the UK. It's basically like the UK's GameStop. So they have these stores everywhere. It's where most people get their console games and stuff.
I
And
think they almost went out of business pretty recently too, but they've
I
apparently
think I
stuck
remember seeing
around.
that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they're pushing their profits into the green now by charging for demos to try out the PlayStation VR.
Right.
So right now they are charging now. If you want to go to their store, if you want to try out a demo of PlayStation VR, you have to pay £5, which is the equivalent to $6 for 10 minutes of game time, or £15, which is about $18 for a half-hour in-store trial. If you do end up buying the PSVR, then that does come off of the total price of it. But I still don't think that justifies what they're doing here with this.
No, no. Well, yeah, I mean that's the VR is like a cool thing to try, and yeah, everyone kind of wants to at least try it for a few minutes, even if you're gung ho against buying it. But this is something I would expect to see in an arcade, which is where I think VR will end up at some point in the future, location-based entertainment. But retail store, I don't really like it, and yeah, they're not. What is it? What is it, 10 minutes, 15 minutes for $6 or something?
Yeah, $6 for 10 minutes.
It's just insane to me. Like that might actually be worse prices than an arcade.
Yeah, like $5 for a half hour could, I don't know, maybe in some realm be reasonable.
Right. Yeah, I could justify that. And I get that the idea is that I don't know, if you went to a GameStop and they had a Vive, maybe for the first week or month or whatever, there might be like a good line to play it.
Yeah, I've seen them in the mall where they have them set up and stuff, and I think that's a little bit different than when you're actually in the store where you are trying to buy the thing, because they're trying to sell it to you at the end of the day.
Right.
You
Yeah.
you don't go into Best Buy and want to look at the new 4K TVs and they say, well, you got to give us $5 first, and then we'll show you.
Then we'll play a movie. We'll play a Blu-ray disc for you. Yeah.
For 5 minutes, that's all you get.
Yeah.
5 minutes, $1 a minute. That's all you get.
All that does is pushes people to feel pressure to buy that thing, because like, okay, I just spent $15 on this doing a trial. I guess I'm that much closer to just buying it anyway if they're going to take that off the price. So it's obviously not. This isn't like a for your good. See if you like VR, and if you don't, no big deal. This is obviously, and their company, you can't blame them, but obviously just trying to profit off of something that's trendy.
And the way they try to justify it is so that they can actually have someone standing at the demo booth at all times, basically helping people that are trying for the first time, which that actually does kind of make sense to me, because every single time I've tried a VR headset at a trade show, there's always someone there to teach you everything like you're a baby. Like,
yeah.
Okay, this is how you do this, and this is how you do that, and watch out, don't
take
hit
a
that.
step forward. Yeah.
So this is kind of something that does require some, especially if it's your first time using VR. If you've never seen it used before, you may need some direction.
Right.
So I kind of see where they're coming from on that, but still don't think that justifies charging people to try out a demo for something you're selling in your store.
No, I think your Best Buy reference is one of the best ones we could use, because it's the same idea. Yes, I need a rep there to babysit me and make sure I'm not going to trip over the cable with VR. But if I walk into AT&T and I say, I don't know anything about phones, please help me find one, here's my requirements, that rep's going to be with me for like half an hour. And
yeah, at least, maybe even longer. They'll spend as much time as they need to get that sale.
Right. And so to again use your analogy, like to charge $5 to say, well, yeah, here's an iPhone, here's a Samsung, whatever. I guess unless they give you a note and they let you explode it, then I would pay $5 for that, but not the rest.
Yeah. So yeah, this is pretty crappy. Hopefully, Game rethinks their policy on charging for VR demos.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That and Bethesda both.
Yeah, we have 2 more console things here, and then we'll be getting back into to PC stuff, talking about AMD Zen. But right now we're going to be talking about the PS4 Pro a little bit, where there was an interview done over on The Verge where they sat down with Mark Cerny and talked about the hardware implementation in that. One of the most interesting things that stood out to me, was the dual GPUs they are talking about in there, but also a gigabyte of RAM for the cache, which is going to be really important as well, and 512 megabytes additional that'll be available to the developers. So that kind of stuff can certainly help, with the processing side of the system, or the cache, I should say. And then the dual GPUs is also another interesting thing to look at here, as well as how they're actually going to handle that. Is it going to be alternate frame rendering like we see on the PC with SLI and Crossfire? There's a lot to think about there, but I think this really did take me by surprise. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess the idea is there's two SoCs or something, and the question is, are there two GPUs that can function independently, or is there one GPU that shares resources or something like that? So from what I was reading, the PS4 Pro is supposed to be Sony does not want it to segment their user base, so they don't want something where developers are building PS4 Pro only games, but PS4 Pro has an overclock on the GPU. It's 911 megahertz from 800, so it can produce 4.2 teraflops of raw power, compute power, and that's more than a Polaris 11 GPU, and it's leveraged with more direct access, through APIs to the developers. So the idea is, I guess you could potentially do 4K rendering if you cheated a little bit.
Well, the checkerboard rendering anyway.
Right. Yeah. If you do checkerboard rendering, which is like, I'll use the word cheat, but basically on consoles, developers have access to where on the pixel a sample is taken. So you have something like anti-aliasing. Maybe you take 4 samples per pixel. You can't really move that around. But with the PlayStation 4, in theory, devs could say, I want this one sample in the middle of the pixel, and then I don't need more samples. That reduces the amount of processing power you need by quite a bit. It could be half, depending on how many samples you would normally take. Yep. So checkerboard rendering versus like line neighbor rendering or something, it's a pretty big deal. And I don't know if it'll look quite the same, but because they can move where the sample's taken, and because, like Joker was saying before we did this video, you're seated away from the TV, it should probably look fine in theory.
Probably, yeah, 6 to 10 feet.
Right.
A lot of things kind of get hidden by that distance that you don't expect.
Yeah.
Like frame rate is one of them. Certainly, I know. Like seeing 30 FPS on a monitor that's a foot and a half away from me is certainly different from seeing it on a TV like 10 feet away. Even
right.
Whether it be, and then resolution is another one. So you probably won't be able to see the difference as much on a large 4K TV sitting that far away, but on a monitor it's a little bit more prevalent. There are a couple of games on the PC that you can go try this out with. Rainbow Six Siege is one. Quantum Break also has checkerboard rendering options. Yeah, and in Rainbow Six Siege they have the temporal option that you can go ahead and put on temporal rendering, which is basically the same thing. And
frame to frame,
yeah, it's basically rendering it like half resolution and then applying MSAA to smooth out the edges, because it's not rendering at the true resolution that you have it at, which gives you a very large boost in performance. But like you said, it's basically cheating.
Works worse on PC because without a low-level API, developers can't control where that sample's coming from on the pixel. So if they can put it dead center on a console, then they can they could safely take one sample per pixel and not need to guess as hard at the colors or whatever. And that's where, with like shader intrinsics or something like that, you bypass these extra abstraction layers of like compilers or whatever that prevent you from getting access to this type of programming. But it goes back to the same first topic we had, where developers still have to learn how to do it, and it's just easier on consoles to develop for that.
And we saw something similar to what we were talking about there, being able to pick the part of the screen where the center would be the most obvious choice to leave that looking good into kind of lower resolution, the sides of the screen. We saw that in Shadow Warrior 2 with that Nvidia tech that's escaping me right now. Do you remember what it's called?
I don't off the top of my head. I ignored that game in favor of whatever I was reviewing.
But yeah, it's the first game to actually use it, where it, like I was just saying there, it renders the center of the screen at the resolution that you have it set at, and then based on the degree of this option that you turn on will determine how big that radius is. But the outside, the corners of the screen are basically rendered at a lower resolution because your eyes aren't going to be looking there as much, so it's not as important. And it gives you a very big boost in performance.
Yeah, that's where VR is really interesting too, because with VR they do that, where they reduce like the resolution toward the periphery of the screen. But in the future with like eye tracking technology, you can see where the person's looking. So this is like a real world use case of something like that Tobii eye tracking, where if I can see as a developer the user is looking in that corner as opposed to that corner, there's no reason to render that corner at the maximum resolution.
Yeah.
But yeah, the PS4 should be the PS4 Pro should be 4 teraflops, I think, of compute and 1800p resolution. So we'll see. It's I guess they can turn off the second GPU too if they have to. So
Yeah, it's launching pretty soon though. So it'll be interesting to see when it comes out, and also if the developers are going to take advantage of it. On older titles too, because a lot of the older titles could potentially be patched, which that Mark Cerny did talk about in this interview, to actually take advantage of having the more GPU horsepower that's in the
Right.
PS4 Pro. So maybe some of those games that were running at a lower FPS, maybe they could bump up the frame rate, maybe they could bump up a few visual things in the title. It's all possible if the game developers are actually going to go back and spend the time to do it.
Right. Right.
But yeah, next up we have our last console story. Don't worry, guys, we're getting back to PC stuff really soon. The Nintendo Switch. This got announced this week. I'm not really too excited about it because I'm not much of a mobile gamer. I couldn't really see myself ever using this, apart from if they have some really really quality first party titles. Like they showed off Zelda in this. But they're gonna need a lot of good games, some good new Mario titles. I think new Mario Kart maybe might get me on board because the Nintendo Wii U, I mean, that did awful. I had no interest in that system whatsoever.
Its sales were not great. Yeah.
Yeah, and someone had pointed this out recently. I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about the marketing for it. Didn't really do a very good job of explaining what the Wii U did. But in the video that they put out for this, I think they did a great. I think this was a really good first trailer to reveal the console slash portable device because it shows exactly what it is and
Right.
exactly what it's made for, and it's going to have a very set market for who it is, and it's not necessarily PC gamers. But I think Nintendo has sort of looked at who their audience is, and with the success of something like the Nintendo DS, I think that this makes a lot of sense for them.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not super up on Nintendo, but the guy who does video production for us is, so he keeps me up to date on it. But I guess as I understand it, Nintendo has been trying to unify their DS and console teams for a while, so they can pool their resources on developing for one set of hardware. So I guess this is the result of that. Obviously, they've got their mobile division now too, but through Niantic with Pokemon Go. But I'm pretty interested in it. It's in theory on the hardware side. We know it's a Tegra chip. Nvidia's announced it. Technically, Nvidia did not use the word Pascal, but they do say it's the newest architecture that's the highest, best performing GPUs on the market or whatever, which basically means Pascal. So this is probably a Tegra Pascal SoC, which would contain your GPU, your CPU, all that stuff, unified memory probably.
So I was also curious is if this Tegra is going to be solely in the actual tablet itself, or if the dock maybe has some extra graphics horsepower in there
I
when it
think
actually docks it, because it wouldn't necessarily need the same resolution for a TV that it would on the
Right.
smaller tablet.
I think it was directly confirmed that the dock is just a docking station.
Okay.
From what I saw just a little bit ago. That would be awesome though if it boosted it or overclocked it or something.
Yeah,
I
or,
don't,
yeah, just because it doesn't need to run at 1080p or whatever it is on that small screen, not necessarily to be able to,
right.
because you won't see there's diminishing returns there on resolution, and running on battery power, you're going to want as much horsepower as you can without sacrificing the battery and all that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Battery life. I'm really curious about. I haven't. I'm sure someone's interviewed them. I have not seen hard numbers on battery life though, but I'm most curious about that. I think because the DS, you could get something like 5 to 9 hours, maybe, depending. And the 3DS was 3 to 4. So, because it's a lot more complex, obviously. So, if they're at 3 to 4 on this, that's most of a plane trip, I guess.
Yeah, depends on where you're flying.
Yeah, right. I don't know that I'd take it on a plane, though. It's kind of that's the only reason I mentioned that is because in their commercial, they show it in use on a plane.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just kind of takes up a lot of space. So.
Well, those things always seem all good and well in theory, but then when I actually get on the plane and I'm traveling, I'm not even I don't even want to take it out and do it because it's just a hassle.
Yeah, well, at that point, you're normally so pissed off at the TSA and every person you've encountered between you and the gate.
Yep.
It's just okay, everyone leave me alone. I don't want your water.
Just bring me a drink, a real drink, so I can go to sleep, please, for the next 6 hours of this flight.
Yeah. So I guess that's what we think of the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So on to real news now. Lisa Su has now sort of reconfirmed that Zen will be releasing in Q1 2017, which doesn't really come as a surprise to anyone, but they haven't officially announced a date yet. but they were being questioned recently, and they said, I would expect that there will be a relatively good initial demand for Summit Ridge that may be, not quite at the seasonal patterns from where we see. Summit Ridge is playing in a space in the high-end desktop that we currently aren't offering a product. So we believe we'll be competitive certainly with the Core i5 as well as the Core i7, and we will be launching in those areas. So that would imply that in Q1 2017, since that's what they were talking about, with Chris Helmegarn of Barclays talking about Q1 2017 launches. So we may see, it looks like their competitors for the i5 and i7 on the desktop side here very early next year, probably at CES is my guess.
Yeah, with the X370 chipset or whatever it turns out to be. Yeah, CES seems not unreasonable to expect an announcement or a release for Summit Ridge.
Yep.
And that's they've done that before, so that's not news to anyone really that AMD would target CES for a launch. And KB Lake's coming out soon. Well, it's sort of out depending on what device you're buying, but yeah, I would think CES, and you'll definitely see like Summit Ridge with their 8-core SMT processors. Should be pretty big gains over FX. Pretty big gap there. So
yeah, this is just something, I've been talking about this for like the most of 2016 now, just kind of waiting for Zen to come out. And,
right.
We're seeing, we're really seeing the age on the FX processors there, but they're still pushing them out. They're still, still marketing them out there and, trying to, show them as good CPUs.
Yeah, they're trying to get them off the shelves too.
Yeah, that's true.
Zen's on the way. Yeah, we stopped for the most part recommending FX. Their prices have changed and they're looking competitive, but the problem is that platform is from like 2011, and that's ancient for a chipset.
Yeah, it's like Sandy Bridge era.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you have these funny motherboards where some boards will do it better than others. They implement ICs or whatever controllers to handle USB 3, things like that. PCIe Gen 3, sure, you don't really need today for the most part, but just to have like a USB 3 without a controller on a board that's poorly designed would be nice. And that's what Zen will bring. So
yeah, and they'll actually be able to put out boards that don't have like PCI on there. They're just all PCIe. I got the 970 Pro Aura, and I was putting the graphics card, and I was just like, oh, this actually has PCI. So right. I was surprised by that. I was surprised it wasn't all PCIe.
Yeah, part of that is an ATX specification where they can take a couple more boxes if they do that. But then I think it's kind of going away now. So
I would hope so. Yeah, they need to get rid of that and just give us all PCIe. Hopefully these are good though. I'm really looking forward to testing these out.
Yeah, it should be a fun benchmark.
Especially against Kaby Lake, which is our next topic here. We got some leaked benchmark numbers, so take these with a grain of salt. These were published over on a Chinese website, X Preview. They've got some scores up here on multiple synthetic benchmarks, a couple of actual games with Civ Beyond Earth and GTA 5. It's kind of hard to have a good takeaway from this, though, because they're testing it against the previous gen Skylake i7. So, right. How much can you really read into it? The single-thread thing on Cinebench was something that kind of stood out to me as being as close as it was.
Yeah, basically the same.
Yeah, pretty much identical, neck and neck on the single-threaded performance, which is really probably the only fair test here between these is looking at single-threaded, right?
Yeah, well, considering, I mean, I would say so, but also a 0.51% difference where you're at 0.01 on the score difference. That's the test website defines their margin of error, but that would probably be within my margin of error.
Certainly. Yeah, for me, less than 1% is in the margin of error.
Right, and it could be Cinebench is I don't know. Cinebench produces some kind of varied numbers sometimes, one run to the next. So, I would, like you said, I would not read too far into this. I would say probably that Kaby Lake is not going to be a huge generational like double X performance jump.
Yep.
It's pretty reasonable to expect the normal like 5% gain or something like that.
I think the best thing that's going to really come out of Kaby Lake or Kaby Lake, however you want to pronounce it, that's the heated debate, really.
Right. Yeah. That's really all that matters.
Yeah, is how you pronounce it. Is it Kaby or is it Kaby? That's the big news here. I think the best thing about it is going to be the out-of-the-box clock speeds being at 4.2 gigahertz. So for
Yeah,
people that aren't comfortable overclocking, you're already getting a very fast CPU, which kind of reminds me of Devil's Canyon in that way,
yeah,
where it
right,
was you could just take it out of the box and you really don't need to overclock it all that much, and there probably isn't going to be a ton of headroom there.
right.
But you never know. We could see some 5 gigahertz processors maybe if you're on the high end of the silicon lottery.
Yeah, sure. If you can overclock it sufficiently, it's I guess possible. Depends on how much they lock things down. But Intel's been kind of harder and harder to overclock that high, depending on which architecture you're working with.
Yeah, I found that the Skylake needed some pretty high voltage there, especially even more so on the X99 platform with the
Yeah,
6800K. That thing gets seriously hot.
yeah, it gets pretty voltage hungry. Yeah,
Yep.
and that's what like some of the EVGA or Asus boards, they have that extra power header that helps out a lot because the chips are way higher TDP,
Yep.
closer to what Nehalem used to draw basically.
So the only games they actually showed on here is Civ Beyond Earth and GTA 5, but again, this is an i5 versus an i7, so exactly what you can take away from that, I don't know, because you can see here that it is losing in both of those scenarios, probably within the margin of error on Civ, but more so on GTA 5, losing by 6.36%. In GTA 5 on very high settings there, and I don't know what the GPU was.
1070.
Oh, did it say
GTX. I
1070?
was just looking for that myself. Yeah, GTX 1070, and then this is an i5 versus an i7, so I don't know. I would have to see what their numbers are for a current gen i5 as well.
Yeah, that's the numbers I would have wanted to see them
Right.
put it up
Yeah.
against. That would make a lot more sense, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, because this is, I mean, of course, the i7 should do better even if it's last gen, especially with games that are heavily multi-threaded or multi-threaded capable, I should say.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, so moving on from that, we've got Acer announced this a new monitor that's coming out. I'm actually pretty excited about this. I think this is pretty cool. The only kind of drawback on this new monitor, it's the XB241YU, is that it is a TN panel, which I know a lot of people don't like TN, but it's a 24-inch, it's 1440p, and it has G-Sync at 165 hertz for just under $500. It's $499.99 retail. So you might see them for between 450 and 500, depending on where you go when you buy them and all that. But yeah, it's a G-Sync monitor under $500, which I think is unprecedented if I'm not mistaken. I don't think I've seen one yet.
I don't know of many or any off the top of my head, actually. Yeah. Yeah, 500 G-Sync is getting competitive with the FreeSync options. So, uh,
Yeah,
you probably have some Acer G-Sync display, right, for your main display?
yeah, I'm using the XB270HU.
So do you like using G-Sync when you're gaming? I'm just
Oh,
curious.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like it's
Okay.
amazing. I can't game without G-Sync or FreeSync or something. I can't do it.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those like when G-Sync and then FreeSync were first demoed to me. It's one of those can't be unseen
Yeah,
types of
exactly.
things where it's like, oh, there's everything's tearing.
Yep.
But
It's
yeah,
it's something that's hard to explain to people. I did like one of the I had bought the G-Sync kits when they first came out because I had the Asus
oh, that's
VG248QE,
right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
and I went out and bought a kit for that day one and installed that thing, and I was just like I was blown away by it, and I have not looked back since.
Right.
So I've been using G-Sync since its inception, and I have no plans of stopping to use it anytime soon.
Yeah, and
Um, I
FreeSync's gotten pretty good too with their variable frame rate and stuff like that.
Yeah, the FreeSync is that there's no standard, so I mean it can be implemented in monitors a lot easier. So you can even find a lot of Korean monitors with it. I've just got the Pixio, which has it in there. Thankfully, that one actually has a good range on it. I can't remember the range off the top of my head. I think it was like 55 to 144, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
yeah. I think I have the same Pixio monitor.
So yeah, so on something like that, it's good because then you're going to be able to get the low frame rate compensation is going to be able to
Right.
kick in and support it there, which is if you find something with a shorter range, like I've seen some that are like 45 to 75, you're not going to really get that.
Right. Yeah.
So in those situations, it's not really amazing to have FreeSync, but it's still good that it's there. But if you're dropping frames below the range there, you're gonna see some tearing and hitching going to be introduced a little
Stuttering.
bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the that's what they try to resolve is there's fast sync too, which is that new Nvidia tech that's enabled through drivers, and it's been kind of out there since the Austin event for the GTX 1080, but I haven't had enough time to look at it though. It's supposed to, in theory, resolve some of the issue where you're spitting out so many frames if you're at a really high frame rate that I think fast sync is supposed to look at the most recent complete frame and output that one, and then call all of the what you would call runt frames, which is where you have maybe like a quarter of the screen render and paint on top of the previous frame, then you get a tear. So all these sync technologies kind of get rid of the tearing at the very least.
Yeah, it's good for that, and it's also good for the frame drops. I mean, I like when I finally gamed on a 4K monitor, I knew it was going to have to be a G-Sync monitor because I knew not every game was going to be able to keep up with 60 FPS, and on something like that, you really need it because you're going to see a lot of games, dropping down into the 50s and the 40s, and you want to have that G-Sync there or FreeSync, some type
Whatever.
of some type of adaptive sync technology, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah, and then of course the next big thing with monitors is HDR, because of course it never ends.
Yeah.
So this HDR is another thing that we were talking about earlier, and both I think at least I have to look into more. But where the idea where most of the monitors are like 8 or 10-bit color depth, and HDR will give you 2 or 3 or 4x that. You go up to like 50-bit color depth or something. That's I talked to Scott Wasson about that on camera before, where it's almost like, to some degree, I would almost rather have a 1080p display with the higher color depth than a 4K display, just because it's that much different with the colors.
Yeah, HDR is amazing. I need to see some. They need to put out some monitors with that. I need some OLED displays.
Yeah, yes. Unfortunately, they have like 10,000 hours of life, which is a decent amount, but I really try to stretch out my monitors for several years. So.
Oh yeah, yeah. I want my monitors. Usually, my monitors I would say last more than anything.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I'm still using, like, not here, but I have some square displays. Actually, there's one on the render machine back there that's from like 10 years ago. Like, but it works fine for thermal tests, so who cares?
Yeah, that's all you really need. Okay, so we've got a couple more topics here to round out the show. This one we'll go through kind of quick here. I'm not sure how many people are actually interested in this, but basically, Turtle Rock has now stepped back from the development side of Evolve, which when it came out, it was met with a lot of criticism. Basically they had a lot of microtransactions built into the game. They were billing it as a games as a service type of thing, but now you can kind of see what happens when a games as a service model fails. And the developer is now going to walk away and just say, it is what it is. We're just kind of walk away and leave it. And if 2K wants to, keep supporting it, they can. But Turtle Rock is now walking away to go presumably work on other projects. They did try making this free to play earlier this year, which definitely brought in a lot of community. Because the game was completely dead. It had no online players whatsoever. Unless you got together like a group of 5 or 6 friends to actually have a private lobby, you weren't going to get a game on this. So making it free certainly brought in more people, but now they're basically walking away and forgetting about and abandoning it.
Right. Yeah. Evolve I tested, and then that was about it. And I do remember multiplayer was kind of absent.
I mean, it was all multiplayer. That was the whole game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. There's just not a lot of players there. Like, so I get it's unfortunate that they kind of revived it and now it's gone, I guess. But
yeah, I played the alpha and I played the beta, and honestly, it was fun, but I got bored of it rather quickly, and it wasn't a game that I wanted to get on once it did come out because so much of the content was stripped out of the game and required you to either get a season pass for the DLC or buy the individual characters one at a time, for a few bucks a piece. So, and it really did feel like it was stuff that should have been in the game because the game had a very big lack of content on launch. So a lot of that extra stuff felt like it should have been in the base game. It feels like it should have been a free-to-play to begin with, honestly.
yeah, yeah. Evolve was one of those titles where, like, it looked pretty cool, and I liked Left 4 Dead many years ago, but I don't know. It kind of lacked some of the life and the character. I guess that's part of creating a game that's so similar to a previous semi-recent title.
Yep.
Doesn't have the same impact.
I would agree with that. Yeah, it didn't really grab me as much as Left 4 Dead did. It didn't have the same charm.
Right, yeah.
It just felt like a cash grab from which I don't really blame Turtle Rock necessarily. I blame 2K more than anything. I'm pretty sure it was the publisher because I believe they've talked about this in the past where it was the publishers were imposing deadlines and making them add features or microtransactions to the games they didn't necessarily want to do.
Right.
Which is happening more often than not these days, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we'll see what if anything comes out after this, but I think Evolve is probably being going away for a little while.
Yeah, honestly, if I had bought this game when it came out, once it went free to play, I would have said you need to give me a refund. Like that's BS. I think if they take a game that you paid for $60 on launch, they make it free to play, I'd be wanting a refund.
Yeah, that's happened before with Team Fortress 2 played it off pretty well, but I remember
Yeah,
similar.
that had been out for a while though.
Yeah, a long while.
Yeah, a long time. The game was basically dying out. It had been out forever, and they transitioned it to free to play. That kind of made sense. But with this game, it's just like it was like less than a year, and it was just like a last ditch effort to try to bring people back onto the title.
Yeah.
Yep. So we got some announcements today, actually, out of Microsoft. They held one of their big, press conferences they do every year, or maybe multiple times a year. I don't know how often they do these things, but it's like their Apple type of, show where they are showing off their new Microsoft, as I'm calling it, the Microsoft Surface Studio, which is a all-in-one desktop computer, which is really aimed at the prosumer audience. So this is going to be 4500 by 3000 resolution. It's going to be available in a few different flavors as far as the hardware configurations are concerned, starting at $3,000, going up to $4,200. So you can get it either with an i5 Skylake or an i7 Skylake, 8, 16, or 32 gigabytes of RAM, 1 or 2 terabyte hard drives, and then the two lower ends come with 965M graphics, and the high end comes with a 980M graphics. But as I was talking to you earlier, if you're buying this and you're a professional getting it, you're going to be doing video editing or photo work, anything like that, maybe CAD, you're going to want a strong CPU and as much RAM as possible. So you're better off just getting the high-end one for $4,200.
Yeah, I think if I were to buy something like this as a company, it's one of those like, first of all, if you're spending $3,000 and it's for professional use where you're going to make money off this thing, going to $3,500 for a jump to an i7 is potentially worth it.
Absolutely.
It does kind of suck, like to people who do DIY that approach. You look at that and you're like, man, that costs $500. Yeah, but it's a small box and you can only buy it from one vendor. So good luck.
Yeah, that was my thought looking at it. Was like, for $4,200, let me tell you what I could build you. It's like, man, I will build you the most amazing editing thing ever.
Right.
But it wouldn't necessarily have all the stuff on it. This has like the touchscreen and all that built in with it. Which is, it's nice. A lot of people want stuff like this, and it's the type of people that can afford it.
Don't forget the zero gravity hinge, man.
Yeah, the zero gravity hinge, so you can lower it down with one finger, as you can see in the picture there.
Yeah, it's zero gravity too. Definitely, real.
I'll be honest. I would like to have one of these. I'm not going to go out and spend the money on one, but I would love to try something like this for video editing because the resolution is amazing in its own self. 4500 by 3000.
Yeah, that's great for doing any kind of artistic work. You really like zoom in and see what you're working on.
Yeah, for video editing, I would love to try one like an i7 out in a video editing setup and have a dedicated video editing all-in-one rig like this. If it was just like gifted to me or something, but I'm not going to spend $4,000 on one.
Right. Yeah, 980Ms are. We actually use one for our on the road rendering machine. It's actually pretty good. It's definitely slower, than a desktop GPU, but not bad for what Microsoft's trying to sell.
Yeah, certainly. I don't know if the higher end buyers really need the 980M in there. I think they'd be more concerned about getting the 32 gigabytes of RAM.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
we higher end graphics.
We blow through so much memory with rendering. Like once you apply warp stabilizers and stuff to your footage, 32 gigabytes doesn't seem like a lot anymore.
Oh no, it's not. I mean, I remember when I bumped up to 32, and I was like, oh, I'm never gonna run out. And then I just went into Vegas and put on a bunch of effects, and it was like, there's 32 gigs,
right?
All chewed up. Yeah, it's all gone. Once you start, especially when you get into effects, anything like color grading, sharpening, it destroys your memory like no other. All right, so last topic here before we take some questions from the audience, and the show kind of ran a little bit longer than usual, so we probably won't do too many questions today because I got to get out of here by 7, which is in 15 minutes. Nvidia went ahead and put out a driver, a really fast driver to basically react to the previous one, the 375.57. This is 375.63, because apparently that previous driver had broken like Windows 10 for a lot of people. Like people that were on Windows 10 Anniversary Edition that were trying to play UWP titles like Forza were
Right.
having a lot of issues, and also flickering in videos and GIFs, or GIFs, however you want to say it. Well, I say it GIFs because GIFs is correct. So if you want
Yeah.
to say GIFs, you can. If you want to be wrong,
If you want to be wrong, sure.
yeah, if you want to be wrong,
I mean,
you can say GIF.
but that's on you. Be
That's-
wrong forever.
I'm glad we agree on that.
Yeah.
So this is just a PSA. If you did download the driver the other day for Battlefield 1 and Titanfall 2, the 375.57, get rid of it and go get this one, because you can't even find that driver anymore on the GeForce or the Nvidia site. It's completely gone.
Yeah. Yeah, it also fixes the mail app, I guess.
Yeah.
If anyone uses it.
Yeah, if anyone uses that, I don't personally. All right, so that's it for our topics. If anyone wants to go ahead and fire us some questions in the chat, we could do a quick Q&A before we get on out of here. Let's see. Here we go. El Diablo says, "Hey Steve, what's the max temps for HBM? Can someone donate to them and ask them this?"
I'm actually
Well, there
not
you
sure,
go.
to
We
be
didn't have
honest.
to donate.
Yeah, I haven't looked at HBM since the Fury X, and I don't know that I ever looked into the max temperatures. So unfortunately, I have no answer for you. What else do we have?
I don't think it's cycled through yet to for them to get the questions. I just
Yeah, I
typed it
gotcha.
in there. Hey Joker and Steve, do you think that that desktop PCs still have a future now that laptops have desktop GPUs and desktop CPUs? I think that it will continue to have a market, but only in the market that really is now, where it's existing right now, is the enthusiast. That's pretty much
Yeah.
the only market that there is for it.
Yeah, Enthusiast and production, and Enthusiast is doing just fine. So desktop PCs are on decline for you go to Best Buy and buy a PC for your kitchen or something type of thing, but Enthusiast is doing pretty well.
Enthusiast hardware anyway. I mean,
Right.
and most people are, enthusiast hardware. They're buying individual components anyway, not necessarily pre-built PCs, unless you go to like a boutique builder.
Right.
But even those guys, they're buying the parts individually anyway. So at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. Let's see. I have not listened to Mendel's Subliminal Colors. I do not know what that is. Is that a band? Might be. I think it might be a band. Someone was asking me about music last week.
Okay. I'm not sure.
Let's see.
High refresh VA monitors. I have not tested yet. One of my staff writers knows a lot more about those than I do. The VA displays, I don't think I've tested any recently, but I certainly haven't used any high refresh.
I've used overclockable Korean AHVA panels. I've used those, and they were pretty good. I didn't really have any issues with it. The ones that were able to overclock any, like over 100 hertz, I didn't really see any
Right.
significant ghosting being introduced by that. They were pretty good for the ones I tried out, at least.
Would a 1050 Ti be a good PhysX card if I didn't care about price performance? It'll be going with a Titan XP. This is asked by the viewer who loaned us his Titan X for a liquid cooling mod.
Okay.
I can't say I've done anything with a PhysX card in a long time. I don't.
If
Do you
physics
really?
is dead, man.
Yeah,
I don't think you need that unless you're really planning on playing a lot of Metro 2033 and Borderlands 2.
I guess if you're dying to spend some money, a 1050 or a 1050 Ti would probably be just fine because all it's going to
It's more
do
than enough.
is physics. Yeah.
I had looked into this a while ago, and they had said the GT, I think it was 930, would have been more than sufficient for anything you could throw it in terms of physics.
Right.
So 1050 Ti is really going to be completely overkill. I haven't seen games in ages actually using PhysX. I can't remember the last game that came out that had PhysX in it.
Yeah. It still gets used as a library, but there's plenty of other physics solutions out there.
Fallout 4 did have that NVIDIA debris thing, but I'm not sure
Right.
if that was entirely PhysX or not, or if you could use PhysX card for it.
Yeah, I don't know, like a same problem where just like a PhysX card is such a specific thing, and I haven't thought about it in years. So
Yeah.
I had no idea how well they really alleviate workload these days.
Yeah, someone had asked about Vessel earlier. Actually, they just brought it up again now. Is Vessel shutting down? I don't know if I've heard
I
that.
don't know. Is that a thing?
It wouldn't really surprise me. I think they had sold the company, I believe, at some point, or like recently. I thought.
Verizon.
I had
Verizon's
yeah, Verizon bought it. Yeah, that's what I thought. I had set up my everything on Vessel and I used it for about a month and I realized there was absolutely no value
Yeah.
whatsoever to that platform and I just stopped uploading to it. I
Yeah,
was
you got further than we did. We like yeah, we moved all the videos over. You did the Google takeout, and
yep.
after like 2 days, I saw 17 views on a new video. It's just like, screw this. Like, this is
Yep.
way too much work.
And not only that, but you can't actually share any of your statistics with marketing companies because it's all confidential, and they
Right.
don't share that information with marketing companies at all. So it's just like it is the terrible model, and I feel bad. I don't know how long the contracts are for some of the other tech YouTubers or other YouTubers in general out there that signed on agreements for
Right.
mass sums of cash to basically give them early access to their content. But hopefully, it's not for much longer because it's a complete waste of time.
Yeah.
Apart from hey, it's only worth it if they come to you and say, hey, we're going to give you a ton of money if you upload your stuff here. But then they're like, oh, you got it uploaded early, and I basically completely walked away at the point where they said, hey, we want to give you. They wanted to give me money to start up to upload stuff there a month in advance or make Vessel exclusive content, and I was just like, no, screw you.
Kill your channel, in other words.
I was like, yeah, can you just not ask me to do that? Like, go screw yourself, please.
Yeah, we went back and forth with them a lot, and the line, they were not willing to change the contract for me originally, and I like spat their own line back at them where they're like, yeah, we're way easier to reach than YouTube. And you try to talk to them, and they're like, we don't change contracts. So I was like, okay, I guess we won't work with you then. I don't know.
Let's see. I just lost the question. It's gone now. What do you want for Christmas? Drake wants to know what we want for Christmas.
Uh, Success. I don't know. Can Santa bring me that?
I can usually buy all of my own tech gadgets now that I want. So for Christmas, I usually ask for stuff that I don't want to buy for myself. So like, I want a new pair of slippers. That's what I want. I need some new slippers.
Yeah.
I want some new snazzy slippers.
Make sure you get some with that, that anti-slip technology or hydrophobic coating or something.
Man, this guy. I'm glad we got you here, Steve. You're teaching me about all sorts of new tech today. Let's see. What else we got? MSI, Afterburner, or Precision X for Pascal cards. Whatever you prefer, really. I use Afterburner. I prefer Afterburner, but Precision X has that, what is that overclocking thing that it does that other ones don't?
Scan OC.
Yeah, Scan OC.
Yeah, I don't use it, but it's kind of neat, I guess.
I wanted to try it out when the Pascal cards first came out when I got my 1080. But they wanted me to register and give them my name and my address and my email and everything just to use Precision X, and I was just like, nope, uninstall.
Yeah, I was talking to them about that. It's a pain to use even for review, so I tend to prefer Afterburner.
Yep. Yeah, I would not use it just for that reason alone. Because if it detects you have an EVGA GPU, it makes you like register everything with them.
Yeah.
It's a pain in the butt. Do you guys think Volta will have async hardware modules?
I don't know. I don't know anything about Volta, and it's not even like under NDA or anything. It's just
not even
no information.
Yeah, we have no information apart from what Jensen has showed on a few slides.
Yeah,
saying that it's on the GPU roadmap.
Right. Yeah, I don't. If they do, it won't be called ACEs, but Nvidia seems pretty invested in their current solution, so I don't think they'd go that route. I think they'd stick with like compute preemption and interrupts and stuff like that.
Let's see. Which other tech tubers will be on TGW? I don't know. I've been in talks with a couple other people about doing it, but I'm not sure if I should say who they are yet because I don't want to get people's hopes up.
Right.
So I'm just going to keep that one close to the vest for now. But yes, Steve will probably be making returns every now and then, coming back when he's available and stuff. So we'll see.
I'm sure you'll get that PewDiePie money soon enough. Be able to get whoever you want.
Yeah, eventually. We gotta get them Linus bucks.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's next. We're gonna get Linus on next time. No, probably not. It's probably not gonna happen.
Someone's gonna just like rip that. out of context and get it.
Oh yeah, they're gonna go post a video with it of Joker said it, and therefore it must be true. Why have we never seen Buildzoid? Drake wants to know.
Buildzoid on his own channel has done a few live streams. You can see him physically, I guess, if that's what you want. He's done a few live streams where he overclocks stuff. He does good work though. But most of his stuff's PCB analysis, so it makes more sense to just show the PCB.
Yep. Good cheap controller for the PC, cheaper than the 360 one. That I don't know. That's used 360 controller is really what I'd get, honestly.
Yeah, 360 controller is probably the best I've used for PC. It's the most compatible with games.
Yeah, the button prompts all work and all that stuff. Yeah, just like if you start looking at the cheaper end, it's not going to really be worth it because you're going to end up having to like set it up with XPadder, and it's a pain in the butt. You're going to have to do profiles for every single game. You're better off taking yourself down to GameStop or going on eBay and finding a used controller for $20.
Yeah,
that's your best bet there. Will you be reviewing the Samsung 960 Pro? I probably won't. I don't know about you.
Maybe. I don't know. I've invested a lot in SSD test methodology, but I just don't have the manpower to do it right now. So,
John Milliger wants me to get Roy Taylor. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd like nothing against Roy Taylor, but I'd like to get it might be more doable also to maybe get Jason Evangelo. He's a cool guy.
Yeah.
Maybe, and he's former press, so that might work a little bit more naturally. So maybe we might be able to get someone from AMD on. You never know. Let's see. Anything else before we get out of here?
Someone asked earlier about the memory, the VRAM on the 1070s switch from Samsung to Micron.
Yeah.
But
I didn't really know too much about that. So if you've got anything to offer on that, I'd be interested to hear it.
Yeah, just there's a BIOS update that basically unlocks the memory speed, so overclocking should be fine once you apply that. It's a normal switch. It's not this happens pretty regularly, where basically in order to keep up with demand, they switch the supply to a different vendor. In the case of Micron, it was not performing as well as Samsung with overclocking, but I think that's been pretty much resolved with the BIOS update.
Yes, part-timer, I agree. PC Per does great SSD reviews. Fifth Gear says, do you think BF1 multiplayer is better than BF4 multiplayer? Without hesitation, yes.
Yeah, I would agree. I've only played 45 minutes, but it's a lot more fun.
It's way better. Like even taking away any issues BF4 had at launch and just comparing it to the end product that you could play now on BF4, yes, BF1 is better. It has better, I think, level design, and it has way fewer weapons, but right. I think that actually helps it out because it keeps it a little bit simpler and there's way less. Well, there's no lock-on stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Which is it's all skill-based aiming, which is right up my alley because I'm a fairly skilled player. I like to think. So I didn't like being killed by cheap stuff. Like on Battlefront, they had that thing that would actually lock onto infantry, and I was just like, "Can you get out of here with that thing?"
Yeah.
You get out of here with a lock onto infantry? Are you serious, Dice?
Is dual channel memory still a thing? There's no such thing as dual channel memory. There's dual channel platforms, and you put the memory into it. But yes, it still exists. So I don't know if that answers that question. Dual quad channel platforms support the memory on multiple channels, basically.
The Joker said both of your videos have helped me decide my build recently. He's building it tomorrow. Well, good luck, Joker. It feels a little bit weird talking to myself, but good luck to you. Yes, I agree with you, Dysphoric. The BF1 campaign is a bit shit. I only played the tank campaign, but man, I was like, I got through it on a stream just so that I could finish it, but man, I was bored to tears playing that.
Can you increase the power target above 120% on Pascal cards? Percentage is a little misleading because it depends on the base power being provided. So like Gigabyte, I forget what they go to. It's like 130, 140%. You can use a master switch on some of the EVGA cards, or beyond that, you'd have to do like a shunt mod where you short the shunts on the PCB and increase the power target. But go to Buildzoid for that because it's a little more extreme.
That's a pretty good question from El Diablo. What happens if you go over your PSU's power limit?
As in the wattage it's rated for?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
You'll either get less performance or you'll get a shutdown. Depends on how far over and how abused the power supply is.
Yeah, Probably, yeah. You could. I've heard of people seeing diminished performance on some cards because they were using older PSUs.
Right.
But yeah, it could result in a crash.
If you're like right at the border, uh, it's not you'll less performance when gaming or something. But if you go too far over power supply, you can test it pretty easily by a cheap power supply. A lot of the time, it'll try to auto detect and just sort of shut down to protect yourself. But ideally, you just don't do it, I guess.
Let's see. Anything else before we get out of here? There was one other question I saw, and now I lost it. Any recommendations on a good CPU for a small office PC? I would probably lean towards like the G3258 or FX, maybe a low-end FX processor.
Yeah, X4845 would work, or a G3258, sure, if you're not playing games on it.
Yeah, G3258 is certainly fast enough for doing office stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that'll be it there before, because it's there it is 7 o'clock. I gotta get.
Yeah,
out
you got to run.
Yeah, I gotta get out of here. But thank you for joining me again this week, Steve. Hopefully we'll have you back soon in the
Thanks
future.
for having me.
Yeah, everyone seemed to like it. Everyone was good in chat, well behaved, apart from that guy Boris, who one of the moderators banned. Thank you to all of our moderators doing a good job. I don't know what Boris did. Maybe he was preaching about communism or something.
Shall remain unspoken.
I don't know what he said. I'm kind of curious, honestly, because I saw him get muted and then I saw him get banned. I was like, this guy obviously didn't get the hint. Sorry, Boris, you can't win them all. But yeah, thanks to all our moderators and Steve for hanging out with us. And check out links for Gamers Nexus, the YouTube channel, and the website down in the description below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the stream and everything. We only got 90 likes and there's 228 of you out there, so I want to see some more likes in there before we go. All right, catch you guys next time.
Take it easy.
And now I got to find the stop streaming button.